Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today I'm going to tell you about some really amazing thrillers you can currently watch on Netflix. So this list is again going to contain two top 10 lists. It's going to be my top 10 straight thrillers, and then we're going to get to some killer movies, and those are movies with killers in them. Not just with killers in them, but movies that are like about killers, serial killers, things like that. So they're all thrillers, but the first 10 or so are not necessarily going to be about killers. With that said, my very first pick on the thriller non-killer list is called Killer Elite. That's my number 10 pick. This one has an amazing cast: Robert De Niro, Jason Statham, Clive Owen, and it looks great. It's a decent action movie, and the reason it's all the way back at number 10, and the reason a lot of people haven't seen it, is because it just falls short, making it somewhat disappointing. However, if you can look past the potential that this movie inherently has, it still is a pretty decent watch. Like, it's a decent PG-13 action movie, but it's got some great sequences, some decent fighting, an intriguing storyline that's supposedly based on a true story. So again, a lot going for it. It missed the mark, but there is enough there to make this worth your while if you never came around to watch it. My number 9... Babe? My number 9 pick is actually my favorite Mandy Moore movie, 47 Meters Down. This features her trapped in a shark tank at, I say the bottom of the ocean, 47 meters down. It doesn't sound great. It's way better than it appears to be. It's no masterpiece. That's why it's back here at number 9. But you'd be surprised how good this actually is. It's got a handful of sequences that did a great job of building tension. And it did fairly well commercially, so much so they are making a sequel to it. I think her presence made people think it was something that it was not. And again, just a solid little shark thriller that never gets too far-fetched, but stays pretty wild enough to kind of keep you biting your nails all the way through, if you do that sort of thing. Now, recently a movie was released called Nerve with Dave Franco that did fairly well, but it was PG-13. It's actually an adaptation of a movie called 13 Sins, which is a R-rated movie with the very same structure about a guy who starts receiving messages that he's going to be given money for doing certain tasks. And the tasks start off light. He's got to kill a fly that's in the car with him. This is basically a thought experiment of a movie. The trick is his bank account is growing, but if he fails to do the next thing, he loses all of it. So the tasks become worse and worse. And it's a thought experiment because imagine where this could lead. And if you take one step down that road, are you willing to continue? Because if you don't, you're going to negate everything that you did. It's a really interesting experiment, and the movie plays out well. I liked the movie. It is a low-budget movie, which is why they did the more polished PG-13 version, but this one is superior. It's grittier and better for it. Hello? It's just weird because I'm here by myself. I keep hearing something. Where were we? Small Town Crime stars John Hawkes, and it's a really good neo-noir detective story. Now, I featured John Hawkes in a detective story last week with the movie Too Late. This one's very different. It's not as artsy as Too Late. It's fairly even-keeled. It's something that you might see at like a film festival, and I have talked about this before. In fact, I did a full review on it last year. I really enjoyed this one, and largely because I really like Hawks, but it's got some good elements to it that were just kind of fun. He drives this muscle car, this matte black muscle car around this little town, and it's just got some it's got some flavor to it that you wouldn't normally get in sort of a boilerplate movie like this. And I liked it for those reasons almost exclusively. There are flaws in it, but because I like the flavor so much, I was able to overlook them. And the flaws are minimal, honestly. I mean, it is a good movie. It features a great shootout. That's almost a spoiler, but there is more action to be had in this movie than you would expect from the first 15 minutes or so. The Third Man is the oldest and most classic movie on the list. It stars Orson Welles and is really a great template for what a thriller could be. The only reason I have it so far back is because I'm not necessarily going on the merits of the movie and how good it ultimately is. I'm really going on how strong of a recommendation it is. And because it's an older movie and because a lot of people have seen it, it sort of fits in the middle somewhere, because I would imagine most people that have not seen it yet really just pass on older movies like this. If you're one of those people, The Third Man is a great one you can watch. It's got incredible cinematography, a lot of cat and mouse stuff that plays out well. You're going to forget you're watching something in black and white. You're going to forget you're watching something as old as it is. It's a very, very enjoyable movie, and there's a reason it's remained such a classic for so long. It has been on Netflix for quite a while. I'm honestly surprised it's still there. I don't expect it to be around for too much longer, so be sure to watch this one early on if you plan to. Gone Baby Gone is actually directed by Ben Affleck, and at the time that this came out, they didn't even market it as directed by Ben Affleck, but it stars his brother, a handful of others, including Morgan Freeman, Ed Harris. So great cast, great performances, but again, you get a neo-noir detective story about a private investigator, played by Casey Affleck, investigating a missing girl. That's how the movie starts off, and then it just kind of continues to build from there, and it gets more twisted and does not go where you think it's going to go. So I have to talk about this one minimally because there will be spoilers. But for a directorial debut for anybody, this is a great movie, and it really launched what would have been an amazing directing career. I mean, and sort of was. I mean, Ben Affleck went on to do The Town. Argo won an Academy Award for Best Picture. So he's a great director. He just hasn't done as many films as he maybe could have in this time period. He was a little too busy being Batman. However, if you never gave this one the time of day or just don't care about Ben Affleck, I still highly recommend this movie just at face value. Speaking of Ben Affleck, Triple Frontier just got added to Netflix. It is a Netflix original. I did a full review on it last week, so I will be brief, but it is, I think, the best Netflix original they've released yet. If you can think of a better Netflix original, feel free to let me know in the comments below, but this was a solid flick. Really well put together, really well produced. It seems like something that could have come out in the theater, and the tension is high in this one. It's about a group of mercenaries, ex-military guys, ex-special forces that go on a raid, basically a heist, for a ton of money. And the heist scene is the reason it makes this list. Even though I enjoyed the whole movie and there are intense sequences, the heist scene had me on the edge of my seat. I was so nervous for these guys. It made the movie for me. I really, really enjoyed this one. I've watched it twice already and cannot recommend it enough. That said, Winter's Bone is a great movie starring Jennifer Lawrence. It's one of her first movies. And again, John Hawkes is in it. Another neo-noir detective thing. This one's a little less obvious that that's what it is. You have to almost kind of be told, or you have to kind of pick up on it. But it's about a girl who, they're hillbillies, they live out in the mountains. Her father goes missing, and she, because no one else is really doing it in their homestead, she is investigating. She's going around asking questions, and it does not go very well for her. She has a rough time with it, but because of that, it makes for a really interesting setting to have a familiar type of story. And for that reason alone, I really, really enjoyed this movie. And of course, it's dark. I love dark movies. That's why half of you or more subscribed. So if you hadn't watched this one yet, watch it. It just got added recently. I expect it to be around a little bit longer, but don't sit on it for too long. Ridley Scott directed a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe called Body of Lies that I really liked. I felt like it was so close to being just an amazing, like a classic movie. And I think it fell a little bit short of that mark. However, it's got some great elements. It's a really great modern day spy thriller. DiCaprio's not running around in a tux, banging Eastern European women in this one or anything like that. It is a down and dirty, fairly, from what I understand, true to life telling of collecting information, dealing with informants. That Russell Crowe, he's just a family man. He lives in the U.S. He's running operations. He's got an earpiece, just a regular phone with a microphone, and he's loading groceries and stuff and directing some really violent, heinous shit overseas. That whole element was really kind of just wild and crazy to me, and it has stood out in my mind. And of course, you got great performances from the two of them. Mark Strong is an actor I've always loved. He plays a really unique character in this as well. If you're into that genre at all, not just the thrillers, but like kind of the spy thriller type of a thing, this one's great. It is a little intense. There is a torture sequence. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not for people with a weak stomach. And then, speaking of Ridley Scott again, American Gangster is a really great crime movie. It's got some great elements that kind of make it a thriller type thing. So basically what you get with this movie is it's based on a true story. Denzel Washington plays a famous New York gangster, and it plays out kind of like a mob movie, like a Goodfellas type of a thing. That's kind of the type of movie you get. But there's also some really great tense, suspenseful sequences, making this one qualify just loosely enough as a thriller to include it on this list. Russell Crowe plays a cop in this one. Josh Brolin has a great, kind of surprise role in this that I thought was really fantastic. Of course, Denzel Washington's great in it. Idris Elba is on screen for all of about 30 seconds, but he's great. Just really great elements all around. If you love the gangster genre, odds are you've probably seen this one. It is going to be featured in an upcoming gangster movies list as well, possibly as early as next week, where I may or may not also be telling you how to make that sauce from The Godfather that I promised maybe a year ago. If you like this type of content, definitely click that subscribe button and be sure to click the little bell icon so you get notified when I put out new videos just like this one, but different. So that concludes the thriller half of the list. Now let's move on to the killer half. Dude, what?
Trust your brain, not your eyes.
For my first pick on the killer list, Delirium stars. For my first pick on the killer portion of this list, Delirium is a pretty good little thriller that is going to surprise you. It seems like it's a way smaller movie than it actually is. There's a lot going on in the story, and I was really surprised by it. But you're mainly hanging out with Topher Grace from That 70s Show in a huge house by himself. And this one really sort of reveals itself to you slowly as the story unfolds, but it has got some dark stuff going on right underneath the skin. 1922 is a Netflix original movie based on a book by Stephen King. It stars Tom Jane in a little bit of a ham-fisted role, but it's one of his better roles in a while. And this one surprised me. I actually slept on this one for quite a while before getting around to watching it, and I enjoyed it. It was a great Halloween watch, but it's about him and his son live out on this farm, and their mother and wife want to leave the farm, and they don't want to do that, and it gets just increasingly dark from there. It's way darker and grimmer than you would think, and it's a great little Stephen King story. If you passed on this one because it was a Netflix original and you didn't think too much of it, it's surprisingly good. I'm gonna flex and bust out of here. 1, 2, 3. Oh, fuck. Another Netflix original, Hold the Dark, is, again, very dark. Everything on this list is very dark. But this one, it kind of surprises you. You don't really realize that it's about a killer at first, so it's a mild spoiler. But if you haven't gotten around to watching this one yet, hopefully this mild spoiler intrigues you enough to watch it. I recommend it. There are some weird elements to it that I think were maybe a little too highbrow for its own good, but still, some really great sequences, an incredible cast, and just, man, it's got a really twisted story, especially for what's basically a made-for-TV movie, being a Netflix original. So David Fincher, being one of my favorite directors, Zodiac is probably one of my least favorite movies of his, but it's still an incredible movie. This is one I didn't really like when it first came out. I don't know why. I think I just had the wrong expectations for it, but it is a great story about a serial killer. It's really well put together, expertly put together, and I really overlooked a lot of those elements on the first pass. But if you don't know, Zodiac is based on the Zodiac killer, so it's all true events, and it unfolds really, really well. There's a lot of tension. Jake Gyllenhaal plays a great role. Robert Downey Jr. plays a great role. I liked everything about this one after I gave it more time and really kind of understood more of what Fincher was trying to do with this one. Mystic River is directed by Clint Eastwood and is actually based on a book by the same writer of Gone Baby Gone. So you've got similar elements, but unfortunately in this one, instead of a missing girl, Sean Penn's daughter is murdered, and he takes it upon himself to figure out who did it. And there's some really incredible sequences, just interrogation sequences, investigative sequences. And whereas I did have a lot of like neo-noir movies on my first half of this video, this one really doesn't fall into that category. Even though there's an investigation, this one's really pretty raw and does not really have that detective element. They're not really detecting as much as they're just pounding their way through to try to find the truth. And this movie does a good job of sort of shedding the light on what happens when you go about things the wrong way. Oh, shit. Law-Abiding Citizen is a really great thriller starring Gerard Butler and Jamie Foxx. This one did really well in the theaters. A lot of people like this one, but it is brutal. Gerard Butler plays a guy who is essentially out for revenge for the death of his family and is not going about it in the way that anti-heroes typically do. He's very, very ruthless, making him the killer in this movie, but it is so entertaining. His character is entertaining. As dark as this movie gets, every sequence is entertaining. There's a particular one involving a T-bone steak that is exceptionally brutal, but also really fun to watch, making it one of my favorite ones on this list. Not that it's the best movie, but it really is one of the more entertaining ones that I've talked about so far. Oh, shit. My next pick, I've mentioned a lot on the channel, so I might have to retire it after this one. But Cold in July, I've really liked this movie for a long time. It stars Michael C. Hall, Sam Shepard. Don Johnson has a really cool and kind of wacky role in it, but this is it becomes a grim movie. It starts off, it's about home invasion, it's about revenge, and then it just kind of keeps changing directions. I've said that before. That's what I really liked about it. And it's actually from the director of a horror movie that I also love called Stakeland. This is a very different type of movie. I can't believe this guy hasn't put out more content like this, because I think this is a really great thriller, which, you know, it's ahead of a David Fincher movie on this list, for Christ's sakes. Blue Ruin is currently one of my favorite movies on the platform, and it's actually done by the same director as Hold the Dark, and obviously by its placement on this list, I consider it to be a far superior movie. Even though it's a much smaller one, it's really, really great. Some really taut scenes, just high tension.
about a guy who, again, is going for revenge after getting out of prison. And it has got some surprisingly bloody sequences in it, and everything feels very, very real. This one to me is almost a modern masterpiece. More people need to see it. If you watch one movie off of this list that you haven't seen, I would say make it Blue Ruin. My number 2 pick is Silence of the Lambs, arguably one of the best movies about a serial killer ever made. It just got added fairly recently, so it'll be around for a minute. But obviously, Anthony Hopkins is a genius. Jodie Foster's great. The direction on this one's great. And the thing I really love about Silence of the Lambs is mainly because I don't watch it so much. I forget how epic the final sequences with Hopkins are in this movie. Just really kind of setting this movie over the top. And as far as things that barely squeak into the horror genre, it's one of the few that has ever won an Academy Award for Best Picture, which might make you wonder why it's not the number 1 pick. Well, that's because, look, man, I'll rock, paper, scissors you. Yeah, I can't move my hands, but I'll just be honor system. I'll tell you what I picked. All right, ready, go. Scissors. Fuck. I chose paper. God damn it. Wait, real quick. My number 1 pick is Seven. Absolute best movie about a serial killer ever made. I love everything about this one. It's probably, it's my favorite David Fincher movie, and he's one of my favorite directors. The entire movie looks like it was shot yesterday, even though it's it's over 20 years old now. Great performances all around, but it's so grim, and it does such a good job of sort of like teasing out the subject matter and easing you into this really dark, twisted story that has one of the, not smartest, but one of the just most brilliantly pieced together conclusions in movie history, which is partly why it topped the recent podcast list of the top 10 plot twists of all time. You can check that out. There's a link in the description, probably. But that does it for this list. If you want to support the show, you can do so a number of ways. You can become a Patreon supporter, shop at the Amazon store. There's links to all of that in the description as well. But I will keep making these as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one. What? Ah!